morning, everyone. Welcome back to the third day of 2023 Material Innovation Conference. I'm Ranjani. I'm the environmental data scientist at MII. I'd like to start today's program with a note of appreciation for your valuable engagement in the discussions we've had on important topics. Over the past 2 days, we've heard from experts on getting the next-gen materials to the market, labeling and nomenclature, diversifying, designing for a sustainable end of life, taking steps to move beyond synthetics, and the challenges of scaling up the next-gen material innovations. We hope today's sessions will add to the valuable insights discussed till now. We would love to hear your feedback on the content and discussions from the past 2 days. So please take a moment to share your thoughts with us either in the chat today or write to us at info@materialinnovation.org. Before welcoming our esteemed panel speakers, I'll take 2 minutes to introduce environmental sustainability analysis and its commonly used measurement approach, life cycle assessment, or in short, LCA. To label a product as sustainable, it must undergo evaluation and optimization of its environmental, social, and economic impacts throughout its life cycle. LCA evaluates the sustainability performance by considering raw material extraction, manufacturing, distribution, product use, and disposal. Over time, with transparency, reliability, consistency, and accuracy, LCAs could even eventually serve as sustainability passports for materials to enter the consumer market. The focus on sustainability evaluation for next-gen materials is crucial due to their association with innovative technologies and novel production processes. By discussing LCA analysis, we aim to promote informed decision-making and encourage the adoption of environmentally preferable materials aligned closely with the science-based targets. LCA can be used by material innovators in developing greener solutions, enables brands to make informed sourcing and sustainability strategy decisions, assists investors in aligning with environmental and social responsibility, and empowers consultants to guide stakeholders and recommend best practices. Despite the existence of standardized LCA procedures by the International Organization for Standardization, there are still disputes and challenges surrounding sustainability claims. I'm sure most of us have read about the Higg MSI Index controversy, which happened last year. So this calls for us as an industry committed to sustaining next-gen materials to address these issues and refine the evaluation approach to improve the consistency and transparency, which has also been the main objective of the Environmental Data Coalition, the EDC, that MI has launched last summer, which now has 60 plus members who have been providing us continued support and contributing their time to help us understand the existing lifecycle assessment challenges for next-gen materials. With that, let's start today's program with the most awaited and much required discussions on untangling environmental assessments for next-gen materials. This session's discussion will aid us in grasping the intricacies of assessing environmental impacts of innovative materials and incorporate lifecycle assessment evaluation into product decision-making process. So now let's welcome our esteemed speakers. Kim Bawden. Kim is the Technology Commercialization Program Manager and Senior Staff Engineer at the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Kim supports manufacturers throughout the supply chain by providing third-party product performance evaluations, performing material and energy balances for baseline metric quantification, researching and identifying environmentally preferable and cost-effective alternatives, and conducting lifecycle assessments. Next, I welcome Lise Laurin. Lise is a pioneer of lifecycle assessment and sustainable return on investments. She founded EarthShift in 2000, which has become a trusted and sought-after sustainability solution provider. Lisa's unique skill set and knowledge base are in demand globally by emergent and established companies, organizations, and governments. Next, Kashif Noor. Kashif is the Vice President of Business Development at Modern Meadow. With close to 20 years of experience in the fashion and textile industry, Kashif is leading the commercialization of biomaterials for Modern Meadow. He spent the past 6 years with PVH managing innovation for Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger brands with a focus on sustainability via material science and digital innovation tools. Last but not the least, Laurent Vandepaer. Laurent is an ESG explorer at On. His sustainability journey started as a researcher on industrial ecology, specializing in life cycle assessment of future energy systems. Laurent is focusing on the ESG world outside of the company, guiding the different teams through the challenges and opportunities in sustainability and circularity. He initiated LCAs and environmental footprinting activities for the company by building the in house LCA team. Welcome on stage, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. Let's start our discussions uh, with, with our sustainability industry experts now. So, Lisa, as a veteran of sustainability assessments, your experience working with companies from different sectors and reviewing LCAs for different technologies, readiness levels, is vast and deep. Is it true that innovators feel intimidated by the amount of data and time involved in LCAs? And is there a way to simplify the process during the early stages of product development? Could you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, that's a great question. And the first thing that I want everybody to think about is, what are you trying to do? Right? You're innovating a new product. What is that product? What are you trying to do with that product? Is it directly requiring, are you directly trying to show a product that reduces environmental impact? Or are you doing something totally new and different? And so that's the first question you want to answer. Because if you don't answer that, you'll never get enough data to answer your question. So it is intimidating, but there are ways to simplify it, but it requires creativity. And you're innovators, you already have that. You want to, I listened to Brad Allenby just 2 weeks ago, and he's a professor at ASU. He's a futurist, and he said, in our drive to sustainability, we have several tools, and three of those, uncertainty analysis, scenario analysis, and science fiction, are really important. And I think that last one is really critical to simplifying. Think about, what's the best way your product could go? What's the best way that both the manufacturing development could go, but also the use could go, and the end of life? What's the best case? What's the worst case? Learn from that and move on. And if you just go those two different directions, you're going to get a lot of information that can help guide your innovation.
That is a great response. Yes, definitely. It's important to analyze what you're doing with your product in the initial early stages of product development. That's how you can start with LCAs too. But could you be more like specific? When do they actually start thinking about whether they want to assess their product for sustainability, and where they should begin, sort of apart from what they want to do with their product? Should they sort of think about, okay, I want my product to exist longer in the market, and do I check for sustainability in that way? Or do they start at the lab scale, the pilot scale? When would you recommend them to start?
If you can afford it, start right away. It's really the best time, because that's going to give you innovation direction. It's also going to help with the innovation process, because now you're putting constraints on. And of course, the more constraints you have, the more innovative you can be. It's just one of those odd things in right? The more constraints you have, the more innovative you become, and so now you're adding your environmental constraints to all the rest. But it also tells you where you're not constrained, right? That, maybe the plastic that you use in your widget doesn't matter, or the oil that you use in your product doesn't matter. It actually usually does, but something else does, right? Focus on what matters, and then use all the rest of your engineering principles to define the rest.
Definitely, yeah. Focus on what matters. And like you said, that's a great point, actually. You also get to know what doesn't matter. And the earlier you start, the better it is always. So, Lauren, that's like after Lisa said that, now I want to move on to a brand side of looking at things because you've worked with different material innovators for their sustainability, assessing their sustainability too as a brand, and you've worked with on trying to see their perspective of why they want sustainability assessments done and how they want to promote their products in the market. So assuming that you've dealt with these LCAs, reviewing them and how they take shape as like from the material innovator side, can you tell us what are some of the best strategies or approaches for integrating sustainability into material innovation process?
Yeah, so the way we do it at Ton is really taking LCA indicators, yeah, as a similar indicator in the innovation process, as a similar indicator as cost and technology readiness. So yeah, to be able to do that, I think that the first thing is to start with really simple use cases to sort of educate the team around you. But that works for us, and that also work for the innovators. So start with simple assessment, I would say, not over complexifying the thing that you're trying to achieve. And then yeah, so same comment as Lisa said, start really early, so you can really guide your innovation process. I think that's really key. Don't only work with the intuition that your material is the most sustainable, but try to back that with data and a bit of a scientific approach, because very often we talk to innovators. They've yeah they
That's
might have
great.
a great nature based material, but they've never assessed uh, their product, and we notice very fast that it's only based on intuition and not really backed by data. So it's very important also to convince your customers that to have this robust data with you, and then have good baseline to compare your material to, because if you only have one number and nothing to compare it to, it's hard to really make your point. And then be also fast, and be ready as you're innovating. Be ready to adapt your model. Don't have a static model, but have something that can live and be modified as you innovate. Otherwise, things, especially in the early development process of materials, they can become very outdated very fast. Very rapidly outdated. Sorry. And then last but not least, really try to project yourself in the future, to showcase, to have a direction towards which you're aiming to, by using these prospective or anticipatory LCA approaches to show, because one LC at lab scale might give you another number, but what's important really for us brand is to really see where that number can go, by doing this scenario analysis, by doing these modifying these key parameters with high and low range. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's a bit my take on this question.
That's great. So start early, start simple, and then keep modifying it as you go, and start with materials that you're not known, like that are not known well, so that you can get a better knowledge of them, and then eventually get to the products you know too, so that you can combine them. Yeah, that those are great strategies. And do you also can you also elaborate on what the stakeholder engagement, like, other, apart from the innovators themselves, like, do brands push for it, or do consumers want these assessments? And how strong is it in starting an sustainable evaluation in the innovation process?
Yeah, I mean, for us as brands, when we are looking for a more sustainable material, that can really speed up the selection process if these innovators come with robust life cycle assessment. I mean, it's nice also for us, the team, so it gives us less work, so we don't have to redo or to do the full LCA internally. Sometimes these innovators also, they are in a better place than us to get all the data and make nice model. We cannot go as deep for each material that we choose that we want to select in our innovation portfolio. So I think that's really the key there.
So Lauren talked about the brand side of what they want. So how about let's look at other angles too. Lisa, what would you say the stakeholder engagement is in this?
It's across the board. It depends on the company, but I wanted to just mention that in a lot of cases with startups, we're seeing the investors are pushing for life cycle assessment results, which is a great turn, right? It used to be that sustainability was seen as a cost that investors didn't want to pay for, but now they do. So it's a great change.
That's really great. Yeah, investors wanted to pay for sustainability assessments. Yeah. If Kim and Kashif have something to add, they can. Sure.
Sure. From a stakeholder perspective, we're talking about driving sustainability and innovation. What is making innovators make those changes? However, other stakeholders that really should be involved, the innovators are experts at materials and designing and conceptual areas. However, in order to maintain and ensure the most sustainable product result is to include those stakeholders that are experts throughout the product's life cycle. The distribution, end of life, processing. If you have a material, pull those people in to understand what are the challenges associated with using a specific product. What about end of life considerations? So pulling those stakeholders in that can add value to the development process is really key.
Yeah, I would echo what Kim said. Like, as an innovator, we have expertise in one thing, but the material system is not composed of just one thing. So reaching out to other experts in the industry, in the material space, in the manufacturing space, and understanding the design of the experiments on how we need to run, what are the other possibilities that are out there, what are the unintended consequences of our decisions on the LCA. I think that is super important, and that is on top of our mind as an innovator.
Those are great answers for what a stakeholder role plays in LCAs. Kim, you're experienced with material supply chains. Like you said, it's important to look at the entire material supply chain, because not any innovators only know about their innovation, but not exactly what happens at the back end or the front end. So can you tell us what are some of the potential benefits or risks if they adopt sustainability evaluation at the earlier stages of material design process?
Sure. So there are always trade-offs in sustainability, and there's no one perfect solution that resolves all issues. And one of the most common risks is resolving one issue and focusing on one issue and introducing another in the process, commonly called a regrettable substitution, or unintended consequence, correct? So a perfect example of this is replacement of incandescent light bulbs with compact fluorescent light bulbs. We're reducing energy use and associated GHG emissions. But in the meantime, we're introducing mercury in the process. And now we've introduced a whole other problem into our environment that now we have to deal with. So ensuring that we track that information along the way to try and minimize introducing another problem in the process while we're trying to resolve the original. Another risk that we don't often think about is companies losing sight of the business case or making decisions that are detrimental to the long-term viability of the company. Remember that sustainability includes 3 pillars and all have to be considered.
That is great. That is great. Yeah, so true. There are risks too. Sometimes we only look at the potential benefit side of it. So thinking about risks and also about how challenging the process can be to decide what to assess and what not to assess, I'd like to ask if you could point out some barriers faced by material innovators in the initial stages of sustainability analysis.
Me? Well, clearly having access to data and information on the risks associated with specific materials beyond the raw material cycling, such as processing and end-of-life risks. That's why we focus on bringing in stakeholders and other experts. The more people that you tap into and leverage expertise to learn information and understand the potential risks, the earlier the better.
Yeah. So Lise and Lauren, you also know more about like sustainability, intricacies, and all of that. So what are the challenges from your perspective that some of the innovators have faced so far? Yeah.
Please go ahead, Ellie.
Okay, sure. So data is always the number one challenge, but the second challenge is that sometimes your assumptions are wrong. That one of the hardest things for us to do is give an innovator the bad news that you're not there. You're not where you think you are. Sometimes it's okay because we can work with the innovator to determine how do you get where you want to be. And that's exciting, right? Here's your path to equivalency, if you want to be equivalent to the status quo. Here's your path to 10% below or 10% of the impact of the status quo. Guiding that process is really exciting. But sometimes what we help them do is determine that what they're trying to do is actually not feasible. And that's really tough too. So again, data, but also sometimes bad news.
Yeah, then me, I would add sometimes, not having access to the right talent, or not finding the good partner to help you with your LCA. I think that's really key and important to for LCA people to be out there and be available and then train as many LCA practitioners as possible, so we can really grow the practice. Then access to the tools. In addition to not having access to data, sometimes it's a bit hard to know which tool to choose. There are some nice open source tool that you can start with. And then some challenges that I've seen sometimes with also with innovators. They might tend to play too much with the avoided effects or the indirect effects that their product might cause, and focus way too much emphasis on this. I mean, that's interesting to have that in the big picture when you do your LCA. But when you look at an LCA study, it's really important to have really robust core that's focused on your specific processes, and then grow from there, and not directly focus on these indirect emissions or avoided effects. I would say.
Sure, Kashif.
Yeah, so I would just like to add from a more commercial point of view in terms of product sustainability. So there are going to be trade-offs within the sustainability profile. So when you're doing an LCA, you're basically designing the product, a sustainable product. So not only there are going to be a lot of discussions and trade-offs within sustainability, but then it's also the performance and the price. Because if you don't have a viable product, no one is going to adopt it. So if the product is not going to last long, no one is going to buy it. So as an innovator, we have to kind of keep those attributes in mind as well.
Yeah, those are great points. Like data, trying to understand where you stand, and then not having enough support to move forward, and investments, and then you trying to understand if you can even get that fund to do these analysis. So there are like different angles that you can look at where you can face challenges. But then Kashif, I usually come to material perspectives in the beginning, but today I wanted to lay a foundation of how complex it is and how different angles look at it before even the innovator can even like present their results to the world. So let's go back to now the material perspective and see material innovator perspective. And see, you've worked with commercialization of products and partnering with brands and designers and using your product LCA as a tool to support your product adoption. So can you tell us how important exactly LCA is in the adoption of material product, and considering that products that are different technology readiness levels, are LCAs performed throughout the period of the product, like Lisa said, or Lauren said, that you go build upon what you have? So can you please give us some information about that?
Sure. So LCAs are becoming critically important and as an enabler for not only adoption, but is actually what we are seeing is accelerated adoption because of LCAs. And most importantly, as we have discussed, it's like quantifying the impact. So the brands know what would the impact be. And with that, you are de-risking the product launch. And it is very important in this evolving regulatory environment. And most of all, we need to create a baseline from which not only the new technologies, but the future technologies can also be quantified. So to your second question around different technologies at different maturity levels, and how do we assess that? How do we take the LCAs into account? At Modern Meadow, we have different technologies at different TRL levels. So we come across this scenario every day. We are inspired by nature, and we are using biology to enhance the characteristics of proteins for high-performing sustainable materials. So for example, we have a waterproof breathable membrane that's maybe TRL 5.6. We have a dyeing technology which saves 95% of water, but due to proteins, we are also able to bring the silk color palette on any fiber. The TRL on that maybe 2. And we have a dedicated LCA team at Modern Meadow that is looking at different screening tools and hotspot analysis as we design the product. So it starts at the paper. Even before we go in the lab, we look at all the options. And on the other side, we have commercialized products. So we did one of the biggest bio-based product launches a few months ago. We have a full LCA on that. And with our stakeholders, I just want to like share is that LCA doesn't take just a few weeks. So we constantly get requests. Oh, can we get an LCA on this, by next month? It just takes a lot of time, 6 months, 9 months. It can take up to a year. It is very, very expensive. So within the stakeholders, how can we share the cost of LCAs? So these are like some of the things that are on top of our mind.
That's actually a very good point. Like, it costs, it takes time. So from a company insider perspective, and yesterday, in one of the discussions yesterday or day before, one of the the investors or the brands said that, why do LCAs right from the starting if you know you're going to change your process, and you're going to go put in so much money into making your LCAs look good, and then eventually your product may not even get through the market, and then you feel that you've lost a lot of time and money in that. So when you think about LCAs that have started right from the beginning versus LCAs that have come to started at the commercialization time, what do you think of, how do you integrate those results into your product design process? And then how does it affect your economic profit and loss changes? Even from a material innovator perspective, brand, consultant perspective, do you think that it's really valued to start it from the beginning? Because I believe that it's always good to start in the beginning, just like you all.
So yes, definitely, like our teams use screening tools. They use a hotspot analysis as much as possible to make sure that it's not only the material system. And we partner very closely with manufacturing and supply chain because we want to be a drop-in option. And there is a lot of data that is already there that we can easily use. And as we go, like once we are comfortable enough, then we will have one or two brand partners to kind of give us a strong feedback loop of what would be a commercially viable product in terms of a sustainability profile, performance, durability. And we work with them to kind of bring that to market. So we have a constant feedback from our brands who are very close to the consumers and from our manufacturing supply chain side. And as well as we have a lot of consultants that we engage with, in addition to our own scientific teams, which we have like over 70 scientists at Modern Meadow.
That's great.
We've also, if I can jump in, we've also identified cases where the product wasn't feasible at R&D stage through the LCA. And by doing that, we saved the company a lot of money. They didn't go down that path. They went down some other paths.
That's a good way to use LCA. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, and then I would add that an LCA doesn't need to be really expensive. It gets expensive when you really want to publish like a super big report to come with it. But if you start to use it internally, I would tend to disagree that it takes 6 months to a year. It can be much faster. We do that really at a large scale here at UN, and what's something important is to build a model from the beginning that you can continue to improve in the future, so that you can change the parameter, you can build brick by brick as you progress, add layers of complexity, and a model that's flexible, so it can be modify with the changes that you put in your processes. But you don't necessarily need to go for full third-party reviewed report, and start with something small, I would say.
That's good. Kashif, you were about to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have, I just wanted to share, it's also like the education within the industry. So most of the brands and most of the consumers, they do want something that is published, that is like peer reviewed, to have that credibility. But then there are folks that are very technical, and those are our partners, where we have going to build internal models and we can go very, very quickly. So for us, it also depends on where we are. And because we will be using those, once we kind of commercialize, use those numbers with a wide variety of brands, in addition to geographically that are different, it is always better to have something that is published to kind of bring that credibility within different governments, different brands, which have different point of views.
That's good. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I think based on all of the panelists' contributions, there's a whole spectrum of approaches that can be utilized. And the right approach is going to be based on where you are as a company with your product. What are the drivers? Who's requiring the information? So we talked about, there's some simple qualitative approaches, streamline life cycle assessment. Kashif mentioned hotspot analysis. Lise mentioned having an LCA that's not necessarily critically reviewed, so you can look at it internally. All of these are appropriate along the spectrum, and it really depends on where you are, how much information you have, how much uncertainty there is in the analysis. Would you want to publish something that has a lot of uncertainty and we really are not confident about the results per se. So I think it depends on the company, but there's a whole list of different things that you can do, starting in the beginning, understanding what those goals are from a sustainability perspective, and keeping an eye on those and knowing where to focus. Where are the biggest risk areas? And there are different tools that you can use to meet those needs.
Oh, this is like invaluable. Like coming to all of this, there are so many complexities that we can see. And like you all discussed, I think starting earlier and then moving on to actually sharing it with brands, or even publishing your results, it takes quite like different angles to say, okay, this is the right time, this is the right cost to spend, or I'm ready for this, I'm not ready for this. But also, like you mentioned, doing all of this takes data, right? And data, like you all have mentioned, is a challenge to get the right data. And you know that there are lots of LCAs published, and we usually, the first step is using the data that's already published, especially for processes that you're not dealing with and you don't have first-hand data. You use secondary data, and that secondary data may not be that accurate. And like Lauren mentioned, and you mentioned, you build on what you have, but then when you don't have that information, the data accuracy is also not in your hands. So what do you think that innovators can do to use data that's not available easily, but through these journals or whatever is published, to keep it highly accurate and try to like sort of narrow down where they can make errors in the analysis process? Sure, Lisa.
Yeah. So once you do your hotspot analysis, as Nathan always says, focus on the elephants, not the mice. Get better data where you've got hotspots. Don't worry so much where the impacts are low, unless you have super high uncertainty and you're really not sure. Go after those hotspots first. That's and focus on that. That's number one.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think that you can use secondary data, but what's an additional next step to really reduce the uncertainty is that modify this secondary data. So go into the data set and then adapt it to your context, to your geography. By, for example, the typical example is modifying the electricity mix, not taking a global average, but taking the electricity mix from your specific country, and then try to engage with a couple of your feedstock suppliers. If some of them are good partner, it might be possible to get proper primary data from them that could dramatically increase the quality of your LCA, and then work on your biggest contributors. That's always the best approach.
And my comment would be that on that whole primary data collection process is just being very stringent about documenting your process, your material or innovation. If there's not a lot of data out there, document what you're doing, all those aspects that are needed to as part of an evaluation: material information, composition, physical units, processing information, everything. Keep it documented that you might not necessarily do from a traditional perspective, and keep that information up to date. Document, keep recordings. That's only going to help you when you are advancing and evolving. Just keep that information up to date. If there's no information available, then you may be the originator of the information and you have to document it well.
And your assumptions too.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, keep a record of your assumptions, because those are critical, and as soon as they change, the LCA changes too.
So true, so true. And so I see like Sydney's saying, it is complex, and like we see that we have so many uncertainties, so many variables to play here, and LCA is complex, and so we encourage innovators, brands, anyone to share their perspectives and this is how the Environmental Data Coalition came about. But also, we are still not in the policy side of it yet, but eventually we might get there. And like Nicole is asking here, do you think government can play a role in guiding the collection, comparison, and publication of this data sources? Because right now, nothing is standardized, right? And we want it to be standardized so that we can have good results and we can be confident about what we have. So do you think government can play a role in this? Any of you can start, it's fine.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, what would be nice is to have more support for like a global life cycle inventory database to add many of these processes or update some of these old processes that you might see in the existing databases. And then in terms of standardization, I think that what we see at the European level is also quite interesting. That has been going on for a while, and would be nice to see that coming into effect. So we all follow the same rules and the same, more or less the same assumption in a given sector. So results are comparable. I think that these two approaches are a good way to go for government to support.
That's good to know. Yeah, government can play a role too. Yeah. Any of you want to add to this? No? Okay. I know it's a sensitive topic about policy and governments involved. Yeah. So going now talking about uncertainty in data, assumptions are one thing. It's about also the variables that you use in those assumptions. Like, for example, you deciding whether you want to do, now coming to the technicalities of LCA, I'm moving into that. And if it's hard, audience can ask us what I mean when I say this. There are system boundaries, right? Like your processes, you put them in a box and say, hey, these are the only processes I'm going to analyze. And most of the time, it's usually your manufacturing gate, and the process starts from raw material side, extraction. So you stop at gate because you are sure of those processes. And talking about all the scope of emissions, you don't want to go beyond because you don't want to make assumptions that are, like Lisa mentioned, totally uncertain, and you don't want to go there. But nowadays, when you go into comparing products, this is sort of something that becomes a big disputable, like, hey, you did your LCA, but you didn't look beyond that, and you don't know if your product use and your disposal will affect what you actually have found out. Like, it may be totally different impact in your use and your disposal. So where do you stop, and why do you stop at gate? Or is it good to stop at gate? Do you want to go beyond gate? This is something that is not exactly something that we can say. Probably the innovator or the brand or whoever is looking at the LCA needs to decide. But what do you recommend on the end of defining their system boundaries?
So I can start with the challenges right now. So as an innovator, even from cradle to gate, there's a lot of variability, system boundaries, references. So although we have a dedicated LCA team, everyone is involved in trying to define those system boundaries, our stakeholders, and you can make your data talk however you like, right? So like, how can we as an industry, number one, kind of align on those things? And then sometimes we are asked for like system boundaries or references that may not be impossible. It may not be a comparative, but sometimes we have seen people use references that just makes the data look so good. So I think one is like the education within the industry, and the second one is some kind of like standardization. And of course, I think we need to look at it holistically. It can't be like, I think cradle to gate is a very, very good start. You can only bite as much as you can chew. I'm not sure if that's the correct English phrase, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But we definitely need to look at it holistically. For example, cradle to gate, you can have a very strong sustainability profile, but if that product only lasts 3 months versus 3 years as compared to a conventional product, at the end of the day, which product is more sustainable?
Yes, that is a great point. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I would encourage for a lot of products to go from cradle to gate plus grave. You might not know what's going on during the life cycle, but you know where products go in a specific country at end of life, whether they're going to incineration, whether they're being recycled, whether they're being incinerated. So use that additional piece to understand the end of life, and then use those scenarios, because that may help your marketing, right? You may find out that this product is super great for low volume products, but it's not so great at higher volume products. And that was one of the things that we found with the HP 3D printing process is lower volumes, great, higher volumes. Now it doesn't compete so well with existing technologies, at least for injection molding. So that kind of information is valuable to the company, right? So take a look. Where is that crossover point? Where is that break point?
Yeah. Kim, do you have anything?
I agree with Lisa. My biggest thing is whether it's included in the LCA or not, you can even include it from a qualitative perspective, but having companies thinking about it, including that in the thought process is so important. So again, whether you know it's formally included or it's considered qualitatively is very important.
That's good. Yeah, that is true. Laurent?
Yeah, nothing much to add, but it's always nice to have a couple of scenarios to see what would be the effects in in different end of life scenarios and situation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you all. And I like that, Lisa, that you brought up that you can do cradle to gate and skip the use phase and go to the end of life, because most of the time, at least you know where your product end up. And in fashion and in materials, I think that's where the most problem lies. Like yesterday, we were discussing about the circularity and closing the loop and trying to design for sustainable end of life. It's important to at least know where your product will go towards the end of life. And also when you compare products, also it helps, because you know that the other product is used in the same way, similar way, but towards, like, for example, when you compare next gen leather versus the other leather, it's harder to know what happens at the end of life with making the actual leather to whereas next gen leather. And we know that the degradability, everything varies based on the design, the raw material that's used. I think we lost Kashif. Yeah, he might come back. We'll wait. But I just wanted to say that when it comes to comparison of products and drawing system boundaries, also seeing that you can use your LCA data to compare it with products. What do you think is a good comparison versus a bad comparison, and where you shouldn't be going into comparison? And where you actually need to do comparisons. If you could tell me a few points about these, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's always good to do some kind of comparison to get an idea. And this can be just a screening level, it's just for internal use, but to get an understanding of where your product fits relative to something, whether it's the competition, whether it's business as usual, or whether it's just driving a car for a mile. That getting some kind of reference point is important. Are my impacts high or low? Right? Are they way bigger than I thought, or are they way smaller than I thought? So I think that some level of comparison is good. I think if you're going to go public with your comparison, I strongly recommend that you follow the ISO guidelines and get it critically reviewed by a panel review. However, if you are in a space where there's no litigation going on and there's no competition, you may be able to get away without doing that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I agree 100% with Lisa. When we do projects with companies, and in my particular program, we do third-party performance assessments, and say we have a product and we're testing it from a performance perspective, we always ask, what's the baseline? Is this good, bad? What are you comparing it to? You want to put something into context from a performance perspective. On the sustainability side, I would agree. And internally, of course, you would want to look at that, where you can find publicly available information to look at and examine how you are performing relative to a similar product. I agree 100% on going public, and with the risks associated with that. The other thing is, I think that early on, it's very difficult to make claims of superiority when there's such high level of uncertainty. And you really need to be careful of that, because I feel that can undermine the credibility of an analysis. If you're making assertions that way, it doesn't look good. So learn internally, and be very careful when you go public, and use an international standard when you do.
Very good tips, very good tips. And I completely agree with you, because most of the disputes occur when comparisons are posted publicly. And I think there is an issue from the traditional material, or whatever material you're trying to compare it with. And it's not an easy thing to compare. And coming to that, with a little bit of circularity perspective, what happens to your end of life, and what you're comparing it to. Sometimes, like when you compare it with synthetics, which is a big topic right now, there is a talk about circularity. Like, plastics can be recycled now, and next gen materials are trying to design for a sustainable end of life. But it's hard when you're using bio-based products, or when you're using different kind of raw materials than synthetics, and we want to completely put a stop to fossil fuel use, or minimize it as much as possible to make it only for the good use, rather than for the more emission oriented use. But is there a place where you can integrate this end of life to get credits, or circularity into the LCA? Are there Lisa can probably tell me about this, or even Kim can tell me, are there new regulations that are coming in to include end of life into the product LCAs in a way that you can credit, or you can define where your raw material comes from? Because raw materials are the emissions, like for synthetics. But when they put in circularity, it looks good. So what do you say is coming up, or do you think it's good to include circularity in LCA?
If the product has a circular component, absolutely. Just be careful that you're not claiming circularity that you're not controlling.
Okay.
If you're saying that you're bringing back your product and you're not, or that somebody else is bringing back your product and reusing it and it's not happening, then you're greenwashing. You need to make sure that it's really happening first. Yeah. And I think, going back to your earlier question, when you go public with your information, one of the things I think you really want to be careful of is the position of your company, right? If you're in a startup and you're just coming out with your new product, that's great. If you're an existing company and you're claiming that your existing product is way better than something else, you've lost credibility already. You really need to show improvement before you start making claims.
That's a great point. Yeah. Kim?
I was going to say I wouldn't add anything.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, okay, talking about data, end of life, system boundaries. Now we talk about the results, the outcomes that come out of these LCAs, and we know that when we get an outcome, lot of companies feel very confident. Yay, I'm good and sustainable. Have done my best in my product. Kashif probably you know that Modern Meadow has done it through from their research and development, like you said, from the paper to the point of commercialization, and you're good about it. But you also probably felt that you could have avoided some things that probably took more time. And looking back on where you started from and where you are today, is there something that you can give like a tip to new innovators or the ones who are doing LCA about what you can define as your scope or goal, and then trying to get there easily, with less challenges?
So I think it's most of the discussions that we kind of already had, the best practices, starting early, right? So, and now I think as compared to in the past 2-3 years, now we have more industry collaborators. We have more forums where the innovators can reach out for guidance. So I think that is really, really good. And then really engaging with the brands and customers to really see what that specific will do in the market. Like Lisa said, like in the very, very beginning, like because the innovators are just focusing on one part. Where is that one part of an innovation going to be integrated into the product, and how is it going to be used? So understanding that and then approaching it holistically.
That is great. Yeah. So now we are almost only 5 minutes left, or 4 minutes. The last question, which I feel is pretty sort of important in this era where we are looking at only carbon footprints for products. And when you talk about results, a lot of products have low carbon footprints, but at the same time, their other impacts may not show that great, but you have no place to compare them because probably the product you're comparing to doesn't even have those impacts displayed or publicly available. And when we talk about only carbon impacts, is there something that we are actually greenwashing in a way too? Because do we also include other impacts which are important, and how do we talk about those impacts so that your carbon footprint looks good, but your other impact may not look good? What would your few words be on that?
Well, focusing on carbon footprint is not enough to claim a product is sustainable, number one. That's greenwashing in and of itself. If you have determined your carbon footprint, state your carbon footprint, and that's all you're stating. But also focusing only on the one environmental impact also increases the risk of introducing another environmental impact that was unintended. So additional impacts should always be considered and evaluated to help minimize those trade-offs.
That is great. Great. Yeah. Lauren, one last question. You've talked about World Wide Web, open source data, which everybody, I think we all want that happening. And what do you think is the best way to make it easier for everyone to get data like this? Because you are experienced in data, open source and making models. You've even developed a Python model for, or probably you've used the model that's been developed Brightway 2 that you were talking about. Anything that you can give us?
Yeah, I think that's something that's really critical to being able to build on each other efforts is really publish as much as possible of your life cycle inventory. So the key inputs and outputs in each of your production processes. So we can reuse that, adapt it to our context, and then improve it, complete it. I think that's
that's great. So I'm going to just wrap up what all we learned today right now. It's so good speaking to real world industry experts, because you get to learn beyond paper what is happening. And it's like you said, you all agreed, earlier the better, more support, more collaboration on the supply chain in every way. And then doing multiple times LCA, trying to see where you stand, what you want to do with your product to begin with, and then going on and building onto that so that you avoid making errors by doing it all at once. And then also in the process, you will also make your LCAs more accurate or more closer to where you think you should be, and having scenario analysis, trying to make things more like avoiding unintended consequences by using different impacts, and also avoiding public exposure of your results unless you know for sure you're comparing it based on ISO standards. So all of these are really, really great inputs from you all, and I really thank you, and I'm grateful that I learned so much today from you all, from your real world experience. And if we have any questions, the audience, anyone can ask questions to these speakers here. You can write to them directly, and you can also write to us. And please join the Environmental Data Coalition, which is actually trying to solve this complex issues that we discussed here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjani.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So like I said, I'm deeply grateful for this incredible, insightful discussion we had on environmental sustainability of next-gen materials. Before we move on to our next panel, we'll now take a 15-minute break before the virtual networking starts, followed by our next panel. If you are not sure about virtual networking, then you would want to try it, because it actually pairs you up with new people that you probably haven't met, and you can access it. Access the speed networking by clicking the networking button on the left-hand side of your screen. So that's you can go ahead and try that. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next session.